This week, a tiny dolphin is found stranded on a Texas beach. Only a miracle could save the helpless orphan an entire town would come to know as Stormy.
I then also noticed on one side a very severe shark bite.
They were companions out for their daily walk, but what happened next was anything but routine.
I started having some pain in my chest.
Find out why one man owes everything to his long-time, long-haired companion. Chuck's leg was crushed, and only one unusual creature could save him. But would it? These miraculous stories and more, coming up.
Our world is rich with stories of animals, on the land, in the air, beneath the sea. We don't often get a chance to connect with the denizens of the deep. But our first story is about a young animal swept up by the sea and into the lives of a very special and dedicated group of people. From the very first time people ever saw a dolphin, they were in awe of this beautiful and mysterious creature of the sea. Just days after the worst storm in a decade, a couple walking on a beach in Port Aransas, Texas, spot a very small, bottlenose dolphin stranded on the sand. Their 911 call set into motion an enormous and unique volunteer-based effort. Tony Amos of the Texas Marine Mammal Stranding Network was called to the scene.
I realized when I first got there that it was actually injured. The most obvious injury was that a bite had been taken out of its dorsal fin. I then also noticed on one side a very severe shark bite. Had it been left where it was, the chances were, I would say, about zero.
Barely clinging to life, the little dolphin was transported in a special stretcher to the University of Texas Marine Institute. The small dolphin, now christened Stormy, survived the night.
People that deal with stranded dolphins have a great deal of emotional and thought about the animal, so there is no problem with getting people out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning if necessary.
But because of the severity of his injuries, it's apparent that Stormy had to be moved to a larger facility in Galveston, 220 miles away.
We meet halfway, and our standard halfway point is the parking lot of the Dairy Queen in Palacios, Texas. And of course, all the people in the Dairy Queen restaurant were very, very curious and peering out the window, wondering on earth what was going on.
And that's Stormy.
Stormy's condition was precarious. Upon closer examination, Cheryl Creelman could see that in addition to his wounds, he was starving to death.
What we think happened is that 10 days prior to Stormy's stranding, Tropical Storm Francis came through Texas. And we believe that the animal was such a young age that he probably should have been with his mother. And he was possibly got lost during that storm, was unable to hunt on his own and find his own fish. Therefore, he probably lost a lot of weight and he was starving, he got sick. He was probably swimming very slowly and then was attacked by a shark.
But despite the advantages of the larger facility, no one held out much hope for the little dolphin.
It didn't look very good with the severity of his shark bite, and a lot of us didn't think that he was going to pull through.
As soon as we get her off, we'll dump a bucket of water over without hitting the bubble, etc.
Even though volunteers were willing to do whatever it took to save him, they were discouraged.
I thought he was going to die. I went home and cried. I cried all the way home and cried all night. I mean, I just knew he was going to die.
One of the most difficult times for Lance Clark was recognizing that Stormy was calling out to something that was no longer there.
And when he initially came in, he was constantly whistling, and we think he was probably whistling for his mother or for his family or whatever. So that was very disturbing to constantly hear him whistling over and over and over again for several days.
It was clear Stormy needed a lot of help. In fact, he needed a miracle.
We had people in the water supporting him and walking him around the pool 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's always someone with the animal. And without those volunteers, these animals would not survive. We would probably have to euthanize the animals on the beaches if we did not have volunteers.
We just kept a close eye on him, and then we'd hold him while he was being fed. And then a few days later, he started swimming on his own. So that was really good to see when I came in on my next shift and he was swimming.
Stormy's rehabilitation was almost like a roller coaster ride. He would get better, and we had a good feeling that he was going to pull out of it, and then all of a sudden he would hit this downslope where he wasn't doing so well. He'd stop eating, he got another infection.
And then later on, a month or so later, he got pneumonia, and so we had to switch antibiotics, and then he dropped in weight.
While Stormy was with us, I had 2 deaths in my family, so working with Stormy was one of the ways that helped me get through that. But it was just to see his fighting spirit.
And 4 months later, with the aid of his round-the-clock friends, and just in time for Christmas, Stormy began to make his comeback.
It seemed around the time his wound had completely healed over and his swimming had become a lot better. It was about the first part of December, I believe, and that seemed to be the turning point. Almost overnight, he had changed.
And his spirit just seemed to be much better. So we knew that he was definitely going to pull through.
It was a miracle that Stormy survived. The devastating injuries that he had, the loss of blood and the infections that he had when he came in, is just a miracle that he made it through. And I don't think that would be possible without all the support that we gave him and all the volunteers that cared for him. And he was probably the most prayed for animal in the country at that time.
The ultimate goal of all this effort, ideally, was to release the animal back to the wild. But Stormy was just a baby.
He still did not have the social skills to survive by himself, or the foraging skills. He probably would have starved to death. So then a decision was made to deem him non-releasable.
But Stormy needed a home with other dolphins.
It was very difficult to find him a home. He was very young. He wasn't even of breeding age yet. It took a long time. Usually it takes maybe a month or 2. And so we finally heard a response back from Mystic Aquarium in Connecticut. And so we conferred with National Marine Fisheries Service, and they said yes. And so we sent Stormy to Mystic Aquarium.
When we found out that Stormy was going to Mystic Aquarium, the volunteers were concerned that he was going to be a good home. And when the vet came down and was so impressed with him and took so much time with him that it made us feel much, much better. So we couldn't help but be happy for him.
Working with Stormy, it had to be one of the most exciting times in my life to actually see him pull through, to see him start doing so much better. And the way he's doing now, it's just, it's all worth it. It really is. I think in Stormy's case, he's a poor little baby that got separated from his mother. And I know for a lot of the women, it's just a maternal instinct too. He ended up with, 50 mothers.
I was on that truck when we went down to pick up Stormy, and just looking at his wounds, looking at his almost lifeless body, I never thought that this animal would pull through. But I think it's a miracle. His skin healed right over. You can hardly see where those sharks had attacked him. And I truly believe that he is a miracle.
He's coming back, he's coming back, he's coming!
Coming up next.
I went to open the door, and Bo was slumped over Sparky at the door.
The amazing retriever who lived up to his breed in a miraculous show of strength and spirit. After this.
It may be true that good things come in small packages, but take our next story. It's about Sparky and Bo, two big guys, and a very big friendship that overcame even bigger odds.
He's a good dog.
Former school teacher Bo Culbertson and his wife Dottie have always shared their home with dogs.
Well, like time Liz pushed him in the pool, then he got up and ran around the pool, pushed her in the pool.
But Sparky, a slightly wild and somewhat overweight yellow Labrador retriever, was something special.
The Sparky was given to me by a neighbor. They went on vacation. They asked me would I look after him.
Sparky was pretty wild. He was eventually raised with a orangutan, and I understand Sparky had to do some fighting. So when our next door neighbor got him, he first warned us not to try to pet Sparky because he was afraid he might bite. But Bo, being the person he is, he decided he's going to go up every day and he would take food to Sparky every morning. And eventually, Sparky got very attached to Bo.
The truth was, Bo was getting pretty attached to Sparky as well, something not lost on his neighbor.
The neighbor finally asked me would I like to have Sparky. And that was a real joyous time for me.
Now Bo and Sparky had another thing in common, besides their obvious affection for each other. They were both in need of their morning constitutional.
I've had him about, I guess, 4 years that I had him that time. And we'd get up every morning, and I'd like to get out, even though I was overweight. I weighed 227 pounds, and I was lucky to have a 155-pound dog. But Sparky and I would go on a walk every morning down the road.
But one particular morning, Bo and Sparky didn't get very far at all before Bo felt that something was very wrong.
I guess it's about 200 to 400 yards that I felt like that I was getting dizzy, and I didn't know why. And I felt like I was gonna faint, really. And after I sat on the side of the road, I started having some pain in my chest.
For the next hour, Bo could not move at all, afraid that his next breath might be his last. Sparky was becoming more agitated, and back home, so was Dottie.
I was getting ready and was running a little bit late for work that morning. Bo and Sparky had gone to take their usual walk. And I remember thinking, boy, Bo and Sparky had been gone a long time.
Bo was now in extreme distress. Sparky could sense it as well, and there was only one way for Bo to get home.
Sparky had on a choke collar, and I slipped my hand through that. But he couldn't drag me forward because it couldn't do his windpipe. He actually turned around and pulled me backwards, face to face. And the chain would cut into his back of his neck, stuff his throat like that.
Pulling him backwards, eye to eye, Sparky dragged his master's 200-pound body over 100 yards down the gravel road.
I came to just a little bit, and I got up where I could lay over on Sparky. And that had to be a burden anyway, because I weighed, like I say, 227, but he carried me the rest of the way.
Using his last ounce of strength, Sparky pulled Bo right to the front door and barked.
I went to open the door, and Bo was slumped over Sparky at the door. Bo was kind of in and out of consciousness.
It's my chest.
The only thing he said to me was my chest.
Dottie knew she had to get Bo to the hospital, but those 227 pounds would be too much for Dottie to manage on her own.
I didn't have anybody around to help me get Bo in the car. Bo was slumped over Sparky's back, so I said, "Come on, Sparky, come over to the car." I opened the car door, and then I rolled Bo into the seat, and then I took Bo on to the hospital.
Bo had had a massive coronary, and doctors worked for hours performing triple bypass heart surgery. Doctors tell Bo that being dragged along the road saved his life. Not only did he get help right away, but the physical movement of being dragged stimulated his heart and kept it beating. The operation was initially successful, but complications caused Bo to slip into a 6-day coma. 3 months later, when he finally came home, he faced some daunting challenges.
I brought him home, and I remember the first thing he said was, "Where are we?" He didn't know the surroundings.
I had to learn how to talk all over again. I had to learn how to walk.
But Sparky's memory of Bo had never faded, and he quickly reclaimed his role as Bo's vigilant companion.
Then he'd come up beside the bed, and he would take his head. He's big enough he could put his head up on the bed without trouble. And he'd sometimes nudge me. And I felt like I wasn't alone. And he was there.
There's times I know Bo shed quite a few tears. Sparky would kind of get up next to him and kind of lick him on the cheek or lick him on the forehead like he knew something was wrong. He was trying to make him feel better. So yes, I think Sparky knew. Very sensitive, especially when he was upset.
I was restricted to the bed most of the time. And he got where he crawled up on the side of the bed there, where he's actually laying in the bed with his head on the pillow. That's where we spent most of our time.
For the next 2 years, Sparky was nurse, therapist, and personal trainer as Bo struggled to learn how to speak and to walk all over again.
I had somebody to stay with him for a while, and gradually he improved, his mind improved. And I think if he hadn't had Sparky during that time, I really don't know what he would have done. So there was that bond. He'd grown even more than what it was before he got sick.
Bo and Dottie are forever grateful for the miracle that Sparky brought into their lives.
Well, if Sparky hadn't been there, I don't really believe Bo would have been here. Well, I'm thankful Sparky was there.
And God made all of them, and He made a dog special for me. And before all this happened, I led what you call just an everyday life. Did what I wanted to. And after this happened, I sort of felt like God gave me a swift kick in the rear. And I've been changed since then. But I credit it all to Sparky.
A well-known path traveled time and time again hides a deadly secret.
It looked solid, and when I stepped, I mean, the ice was just so thin.
Stay with us for more miraculous stories. We will return with more miraculous animal stories in a moment.
Our lives would be unimaginable without the miraculous animals with whom we share our world. We sometimes take each other for granted, but when the chips are down, there's never any question about how much we rely on each other. Well, our next story is about such a relationship. It's about a dog and his owner who find themselves far from home on dangerously thin ice. Fred Priest is a man who knows that when it comes to relationships with animals, you usually get back what you give. His dog Scooter convinced him of that. Scooter is just the latest addition to a somewhat motley crew of farm animals.
I like to have chickens because I know they're in cages, and if I can raise a few and let them have, run, it makes me feel good to think that I can do that. My cows, I guess I just love them because that's all I grew up on the farm with the cows, And I'm just an animal lover. I just love everything.
Fred's daughter Peggy remembers when her dad helped her raise a deformed calf born 2 winters ago.
His leg was deformed because the wound was too small.
The cow's front leg curled up and he needed help walking, so Fred built him a special prosthetic, despite the fact that the local vets didn't think it would work out that well.
He's a little life, and when I see him and he appears to be happy, then I think it's worth all the care that we give him.
Fred loves all his animals, but Scooter's definitely his favorite. Yet he almost didn't get this little German Shepherd cross because he didn't think he could deal with his emotions.
I had just lost my other dog, Toby. Yeah, he had cancer, I believe, tumor. And it hurt so much, I just said, no, I can't do it anymore. I took Toby's death so hard. And I said, if I don't get another dog, I won't have to go through this again.
But Fred's wife, Verda, convinced him to take a look at Scooter, a dog in need of a new home.
I had talked with Fred about getting a dog because we needed someone sort of to watch over his mother.
When I got to the farm where she lived, it was just like love at first sight. I mean, she took to me and I took to her, and there was no way I was going to leave her there. I brought her right home. And I'm not sorry that I did.
Scooter was supposed to be Fred's mother's dog, but Scooter wanted to be with Fred.
As time went on, we had to let her stay with Fred because she got so lonesome she wouldn't eat. She just kept running from window to window upstairs in the house, following Fred wherever he would be.
So Fred took the dog into his own home next door, and soon he and Scooter were inseparable. One crisp day, Scooter and Fred were out for one of their frequent walks near the river.
Well, I just had nothing to do, so I said, well, let's go for our walk, we'll go across the river, and away we went. It was really cold. I don't know why I wanted to go across the river in that cold weather, but I thought it was safe.
As Fred stepped carefully onto the apparently frozen river, he realized that he had made a terrible miscalculation.
It looked solid. When I stepped, the ice was just so thin. I went down, and my feet didn't touch bottom.
Fred struggled in the icy water, but was unable to pull himself out.
When I was in the water, all I was thinking was drowning because I'm terrified of drowning. I never liked to swim in water over my head, and I was just terrified.
In a panic, Fred began to realize that he was perilously close to drowning.
I don't fear death. I'm not worried about that. But it's the way I would go.
Then Fred saw Scooter at the end of her leash, excitedly moving towards him. With the last of his strength, Fred began to pull on the rope.
I weigh about 185 pounds, so in the wet, it's a good weight. A good 200 pound or more for her to do.
As Fred began to pull himself up, Scooter dug in and held her ground.
The reason she was able to hold me, I think it's just like, how they say humans sometimes have super strength when a loved one is trapped or pinned under something. Well, I just think, the Scooter cared so much that it just gave her super strength.
With Scooter as his anchor, Fred slowly pulled himself out of the river. But his ordeal wasn't over yet. He still had to make it home before he froze to death.
It was just this slow going, kind of scared me, you know, that I wouldn't make it. It'd be just like walking on ice, slippery ice.
Wet and frozen, Fred stumbled through the snow. When he fell, Scooter urged him to get back up.
I must have fell a half a dozen times. You know, I hit my head on the hard snow. And when that would happen, she would always come right to me, like she knew.
A bone-chilling hour later, Fred finally collapsed at his mother's door.
My husband and I was both worried about him. He never got home for quite a while. And he come home he was soaked, his clothes just froze right to him. He was just icy.
Thanks to Scooter, Fred is still around to celebrate an important milestone in his family's life.
This coming June, it will be 30 years that we've been married, and she is a truly hero. If it were not for her, I would not have my husband today.
Scooter's heroic turn didn't go unnoticed. Word about the gutsy little dog soon spread, and in 1999, she was inducted into the Pet Hall of Fame. And the bond between Fred and Scooter? Well, let's just say that his kindness to animals is still being repaid.
I call her my little guardian angel. I believe she was sent to me for a purpose. And I'm very thankful that she did come into my life. There's no doubt about it.
On a cold, dark night, lost in the woods with little hope of escape, one incredible dog shows his amazed companion the unmistakable call of the wild.
He was truly guarding me and protecting me.
When we return.
Most heroes are the quiet type. Their actions speak louder than words, but when they have something to say, they say it loud and clear. Well, that's a bit like our next story. It's about a quiet dog named Chivas who saved his bark until it was most needed.
Ann Munson lived most of the time on her own. She thought that she might like to get a dog for company, but she wasn't in a great hurry.
Well, I had been searching through the papers off and on the weekend. There's a special section about animals at the local shelters. And I saw one particular one in Norwell that was a black lab puppy, friendly, will be put down if not adopted within the next few days. And I thought, what a shame, black labs, I always thought they were terrific dogs.
Ann went down to the kennels. But when she got there, she wasn't sure this big black lab was the dog she was looking for.
When I arrived, I was a little surprised because he wasn't just a puppy. He was a big, bounding, very spirited dog.
But Chivas had a winning face, and soon Ann was smitten. She decided she just couldn't leave him there.
They were going to put him down. He had been there and spent all the money that was going to be spent upon him, and I thought, if I can't handle him, then I'll find someone else that will.
Chivas and Ann got along famously, but she was a little nervous about introducing him to her father, Nils, who spent each summer with her. That was because Chivas, who had been abused before Ann got him, did not like men. Chivas seldom barked, but he expressed his dismay in other ways.
Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind the dog. He's fine.
I think I saw Chivas perhaps a month or so after Ann acquired him. And he wouldn't let me near Ann. As a matter of fact, when I moved to kiss Ann, he all but growled.
But Nils was determined to win Chivas over, and after a lot of treats and many long walks, he and the newest member of the family were fast friends. Soon Nils and Chivas were to be seen everywhere together. Early one evening, Nils took Chivas for his usual walk in a nearby woods. When Ann returned home from work, the house was quiet.
Dad?
Her father had never been this late before.
I came back home and I thought, you know, something's just not right. Now it was dusk. Called the non-emergency police number and asked them for help, explained that my dad usually walks the dog in the neighborhood, but he's nowhere to be found, and it's very late, and this is extremely unusual.
Something was very wrong. Nils had ventured further than usual, and the shortcut he tried to take home soon turned into a morass of deep swamp and thick briars. And he was quickly becoming very disoriented.
By the time I realized that we were in sort of trouble, it had gotten dark. And I kept seeing what appeared to be safe ground, but they were optical illusions. I say that I wasn't lost. I just didn't know where I was.
Inching his way through thick, sharp branches, Nils felt his best chance was to send Shivas home, alone.
I had, in the interim, released Shivas from his leash and said, go home, but he wouldn't leave me. And it was just fascinating how he just stayed with me.
About a year prior to that, we had a similar incident where someone had wandered off and we were unable to locate him.
Police Detective Brian Calhoun knew how serious the situation was. Only a year earlier, a man had died, lost in those same woods.
In fact, it was a canine dog who found our party's remains probably 6 months later when the thaw came in.
Although his situation was desperate, with Shivas at his side, Nils felt a deep calm come over him.
As I look back, it's strange that I wasn't the slightest bit afraid. I can't understand it because I was in more trouble than I realized.
But the going was very tough, and Nils was getting tired.
There was one period where I saw a clump of growth that was so solid that it formed a pad, and I started to sit on it and then lie down, and I thought to myself, I better not stay this way because I'll fall asleep. And if I fall asleep, nobody will get out to find me.
Meanwhile, Ann and the police continued to search.
The patrolman said, well, it's probably best if you stay home. And I said, no, I'm not staying home. And I said, just find my dog, you'll find my dad. I know they're together.
Refusing to leave Nils' side, Shivas continued to lead the way through the undergrowth. To Nils' amazement, he barked from time to time to keep any other animals at bay.
He was staying close to me, and he'd go around to make sure that nothing was going to bother him. He scared off some kind of an animal. It was just amazing that he would stay with me all that time and stay so close to me, because he was truly guarding me and protecting me.
Ann was getting desperate. She knew her father wore only light clothes. The night was getting very damp and cold.
I decided if I called the dog's name, maybe he would respond. And so I started to call his name and his nicknames and Chef Chev and Big Boy, come on, wherever you are. And with that, I heard all of a sudden a dog barking. And Brian Calhoun said, Ann, is that your dog? And I looked at him, I said, Brian, I don't know for sure because the dog just doesn't bark. I don't hear him bark.
Brian Calhoun heard something very specific in the tone of the dog's bark. He was calling to them.
I'm a former canine handler. I had 8 years canine experience. And one of the things my trainers always told me was that you need to listen to your dog. And I listened to this dog. Again, it was faint. It was pretty far away. But the barking was intense, and it was stressed.
And Detective Calhoun and his partner followed the sound of the barking dog. And a full 5 hours after they'd gone missing, Nils and Shivas were finally found.
When the police officers arrived, he just was so friendly with them. I couldn't believe it, because men with uniforms, he was suspicious of. Dogs and animals have this indescribable sensitivity that we are not blessed with, that they know when somebody's trying to help you.
As exhausted as he was, Nils insisted on walking out on his own. With the officers' help, Nils and Shivas were led out of the woods to safety.
When my father came out of the woods, he looked like something out of a Frankenstein movie. He had cuts all over his legs, his arms. He was just bloodied, just a horrible mess. He had muck all over him, and he just looked terrible.
Nils hasn't taken Shivas into the woods since that day, but he has taken him to an awards dinner where the former pound dog was made Massachusetts SPCA Hero of the Year for 1999.
All I can say is just a fabulous dog, and he and I have somehow established a bond that is inexplainable. He understands it, so do I.
Coming up next, llamas, meaner than camels, more stubborn than mules, the most unusual source for miraculous courage. When we return, we want to share your miraculous animal stories. Visit us online at www.animalmiracles.tv.
Is it possible to overcome a life filled with cruelty to reach the higher level of compassion? Well, as human beings, we hope so, but rarely do we expect to see such behavior in an animal as unusual as a llama.
As a cowboy and backcountry guide, Chuck Jean is the one neighbors turn to when they want help training their dogs and horses. But when Chuck's mother said she wanted him to teach her llamas to pull a horse cart, he didn't think much of the idea.
I said, no, I don't want anything to do with those woolly goats, Mom. No, I want you to do it. Yeah, good boy. Through her persistence, I went out there and I actually started playing around with it. In half an hour, I had this llama bonded with me, had him in the cart, had him on his pony harness, and we were going down the road. Good guys. Oh, yes, good boys. Doing just fine. I also saw right off the bat that these llamas were very communal, even more so than horses and dogs. So what I decided right away to do was to build them so that I could put them in a team together and start working in that way. Yeah. Pretty soon it became a worldwide thing about the success I was having with training llamas and driving llamas and with the cart and equipment, and it grew into quite a thing.
Chuck's success with the llamas was thanks to a gift he'd had all his life.
Yes, yes. Getting jealous, are we? Are we getting jealous? I guess it all boils down to animals as you'd have them do unto you.
Chuck soon began working with other people's aggressive, bad-tempered llamas. Chuck called them berserk llamas. Llama expert Marnie Volans explains how this behavior is a result of something called human imprinting.
Imprinting is being raised too closely to human from birth, and before you know it, that llama thinks of you as another llama. As it's growing up and getting to be a larger animal, it then tries to do a few things with you like it would do with its herd buddies. An aggressive llama can come charging at you and pounce on you. He'll chest butt you and throw you on the ground and then stomp on you with his front feet.
One day, the owner of a particularly bad-tempered llama contacted Chuck.
He said, I got this llama, and he says, he's crazy. He says, the sucker's going to kill somebody. He says, he's just unreal. He sees a human being and he's trying to get over the fence to kill him.
And that's how Chuck came to meet Tony, the llama.
Yep. I brought him home, and I backed the truck up and dumped him off the truck and closed the pen behind him. And I thought, well, this is going to be a challenge to play with him, because I wanted to, further my knowledge in these llamas that were used and abused.
Chuck could see right away that Tony's aggressive behavior towards humans was well-founded.
He had welts on the back of his neck, down his back when I got him, because as the story went, they had got some cowboy in there to come in there with this was a 2x4 is what they told me. And he went in there and he just beat this llama in a crowd with him. Every time the llama came at him, he'd hit him with it. And the story went to me that he actually had stunned him and knocked him to the ground. And when the llama got back up again, he come right back at him looking for more.
Tony had become violent because of cruelty. Chuck's only hope now was that compassion could reach this badly damaged creature.
So this is the kind of aggression this animal had and the anger he had towards people. But I would just keep roping him 3 or 4 times a day, and then I could start, you know, petting him and rubbing his ears and rubbing him around, you know, and bonding with him and associating me with a lack of pain.
Every day for months, Chuck worked with the llama. Little by little, Tony began to soften.
Come on, push.
There was no doubt about it. Tony was a changed llama. His turnaround was so complete, everyone was surprised. The closeness between Chuck and Tony even extended indoors.
You know, as we go in the house, I'd holler at Tony out in the pasture, come on, Tony, come on in, you know. And we'd go in and sit down in the house and, you know, tell him to lay down and tell him to push, and he'd lay down just like my dog would. And we'd sit there and we'd watch TV.
Then one cold and bitter autumn day, Tony and Chuck's relationship was put to the test.
Well, I was packing some horse panels up the lower part of my pasture, and it's a very steep incline. I slipped. And the panel fell down on my knee and drove my knee into the ground. And I was in excruciating pain.
Racked with pain and unable to move, Chuck was in serious trouble, and he knew it.
I needed to get somebody to help me because I was just too slippery and I was hurting so bad I couldn't get anybody to, I would need help to get up there.
That's when Chuck heard Tony running across the field towards him, snorting and spitting as he galloped up.
I was concerned that he may revert to his berserkness that he had come from. So I was expecting the impact when he come on me, and I'd seen what llamas can do when they come down on you, you know, with their front feet down on you.
As the llama charged towards him, Chuck prepared for the worst.
I put my hand up over my head as he was coming up from behind me, and he just put the brakes on when he hit me there, and he just stopped right there, and he started sniffing me all over my body. He knew I was hurting, and then I realized at that point that he wasn't going to hurt me.
If Chuck was going to make it back to the farm, he would need Tony's help.
And I put my arm up around him, started trying to inch my way up, and I used Tony to pull myself up. But there's no way I could walk. I couldn't walk. I got one leg. I can't put anything on this leg. I really thought I'd split my kneecap, and that's what it felt like. It was terrible.
Why? To Chuck's amazement, Tony allowed him to apply the full weight of his body to his back.
Good boy. Okay, Tony, let's go. I finally threw my body right over top of Tony, draped him just like you'd see in the westerns, where you'd see they'd throw a body over top of a horse. You know, that's exactly what I did with Tony. And I said, Tony, let's go up, boy.
With no other encouragement, Tony carefully carried Chuck back to the farmhouse. A few days in bed with a bandaged knee gave Chuck plenty of time to reflect on what Tony had done.
I thought about these things and thought it was pretty miraculous that he did go in the right direction, and it was just like he knew where he had to take me. I was aware at that point that the animal actually cared for my well-being. It really did, you know, and he proved this time and time again.
Chuck and Tony shared a special bond over the years that followed.
And Tony came from such an abusive background to where he became like my dog to me, because we went through so much together.
And that's how Tony and Chuck became friends for life.
Well, that's our show, but we'll be back soon with more true stories about animal miracles. Until then, please be kind to animals. They deserve it, and they enrich our lives in so many miraculous and wonderful ways. I'm Alan Thicke, and we'll see you next time.